The afternoon sun cast long shadows over Liberty Memorial Park, a peaceful space dedicated to honoring fallen soldiers. The bronze statues stood tall, names etched into stone plaques, each one a reminder of the men and women who had given everything. Families strolled through, some pausing to read the inscriptions, others leaving flowers at the base of the monuments. Sitting on a worn wooden bench near the main statue, Colonel James Jim Reynolds leaned on his cane, his old Vietnam veteran patch sewn onto the sleeve of his weathered jacket. His face was lined with years of service, his hands rough with time, but his posture was still strong, his presence commanding. He was simply enjoying the quiet. Then came the laughter. Ryan Carter strolled into the park, sunglasses perched on his head, an expensive watch flashing under the sunlight. His girlfriend Jessica walked beside him, trying to take in the scenery, while Mark and Josh, his equally arrogant friends, followed close behind. Ryan glanced around, unimpressed. Man, I don't get why people make such a big deal about this kind of stuff. Jessica frowned. It's a memorial, Ryan. You know, for soldiers. Ryan rolled his eyes. Yeah, I get it. But come on, half these guys probably just sat in an office all day. Not exactly the heroes people make them out to be. Mark snorted, nudging Josh. Yeah, how hard is it to push paper, right? Their laughter carried through the park, drawing the attention of nearby visitors who had stopped to read the plaques. A few people shifted uncomfortably, but no one said anything. No one, except Jim. Slowly, the old war hero looked up from his bench, his sharp eyes settling on Ryan and his group. He didn't speak, just watched. And Ryan, arrogant and oblivious to the weight of his words, locked onto him. See, look at this guy, Ryan said, nodding toward Jim. Bet he's one of those old vets who tells war stories no one asked for. Mark laughed. Hey, maybe he'll tell us how he won a battle from his office chair. Jessica looked mortified. Ryan, stop it! But Ryan wasn't done. With a smirk, he strode toward Jim's bench, stopping just a few feet away. What about you, old-timer? You one of those guys who got a medal just for showing up? The air shifted. The soft murmurs of tourists faded, replaced by an uneasy silence. Nearby, a father gently pulled his young son back, sensing that something was about to happen. Jim didn't move, didn't blink. He simply set down his coffee cup and straightened his spine. Ryan scoffed. What, nothing to say? Thought you guys were all about talking yourselves up. And then, in a voice calm, steady, and sharp as steel, Jim finally spoke. You really don't know what respect means, do you, son? Ryan's smirk faltered. Jim pushed himself to his feet. Even at his age, even leaning on his cane, there was something about him, something unshakable, something powerful. The tourists who had been watching took a step closer, drawn in. Jessica grabbed Ryan's arm. Ryan, let's just go. But Ryan, fueled by his own arrogance, doubled down. Oh, come on, it's a joke. You old guys act like you saved the world or something. Jim tilted his head, studying him. And then, with absolute clarity, he said, I held men in my arms as they took their last breaths for your right to run your mouth. The entire park fell silent. Ryan's cocky expression froze, his brain scrambling for a comeback. Jim took a slow step forward. I buried my friends in foreign soil so you could stand here today, free to be ignorant. I don't care if you respect me, but you will respect them. Mark and Josh shifted uncomfortably, their earlier laughter now long gone. A voice from the crowd muttered, Damn right. Jessica yanked on Ryan's sleeve, her face red with embarrassment. Ryan, let's go. Ryan, still rattled, turned away without another word. His hands were balled into fists, his chest tight with frustration. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had meant to make a joke. Instead, he had been shut down in front of a crowd. He stalked away, his face burning. Behind him, Jim simply sat back down, picked up his coffee, and returned to his peaceful afternoon. He had nothing else to prove. He had already won. And Ryan? He had no idea what was coming next. Ryan stormed out of Liberty Memorial Park, his face burning with humiliation. The weight of dozens of silent, judging stares still pressed against his skin, suffocating him with embarrassment. He had never been shut down like that before, especially not by some old guy with a cane. His heart pounded in his chest as he walked faster, his fists clenched. He could hear Mark and Josh trailing behind him, their usual snickers now absent. Even Jessica, who was normally glued to his side, had fallen a few steps behind, arms crossed, face unreadable. He hated the silence. That was whatever, he muttered, waving a hand as if to dismiss the whole encounter. The guy's probably been telling that same dramatic speech to anyone who will listen for the past 30 years. Josh rubbed the back of his neck, hesitating. Yeah, man, but that was kinda intense. The whole park just... Yeah, Mark cut in, his voice lower than usual. That felt different. Ryan turned sharply. Oh, so now you guys are on his side. Since when do we let some random old man shut us up like that? Jessica finally spoke, her voice tight with frustration. Since he was right, Ryan. Ryan's stomach twisted. He scoffed, shaking his head. Oh, come on. Don't tell me you actually fell for that little performance. The guy's been living off war stories for decades. You really think... Yes, Jessica snapped, stepping in front of him. I do, and you should too. Ryan froze. He had never heard her talk to him like that before. Jessica shook her head, disgusted. You embarrassed yourself. You embarrassed me. Ryan opened his mouth to argue, but she wasn't done. You don't even realize how badly you messed up, do you? She continued. Did you even see how people looked at you? No one was laughing. Everyone was ashamed to be standing near you. Ryan's jaw tightened. His ego screamed for him to defend himself, to make her see that he was still in control. But then Mark pulled out his phone. Dude, you might want to see this. Ryan frowned as Mark turned the screen toward him. A video was playing. The video, the one of him. Every single word he had spat at the old man. Every second of his smug arrogance. The moment Jim had stood, the power shift that had sucked the air out of the park. The way Ryan had backpedaled, stunned into silence. His face twisted with uncertainty. His posture shrunken. His eyes filled with a brief flicker of realization. And then, the comments. This is the most satisfying shutdown I've ever seen. Imagine trying to insult a war hero and getting humiliated in front of an entire park. The way he literally had no comeback. Priceless. I hope this dude loses everything. He deserves it. The video had been posted less than an hour ago. It already had over 200,000 views. Ryan's skin went cold. This isn't funny, he muttered, snatching the phone from Mark. He scrolled, desperately searching for a comment. Oh, any comment that defended him. There were none. Every single one condemned him. Every single one was laughing at him. His breath came faster. His hands started shaking. His throat tightened. No, he whispered. No, this is out of context. This is... Josh took his phone back. Dude, you did this to yourself. Ryan clenched his jaw. This'll blow over. The internet gets mad at something new every day. By tomorrow... Jessica let out a sharp laugh. You really think that? This is your legacy now. This is who you are. Ryan shook his head. I just need to... Then his phone buzzed, a notification, then another, then another. People had found his full name. People had found out where he worked. His company's website was being flooded with complaints. His boss had emailed him. Subject: urgent, immediate call requested regarding public incident. His stomach lurched. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the flood of messages. Strangers messaging him, calling him a disgrace, telling him to apologize, telling him to disappear. His ears rang, his vision blurred, his breath came too fast, too shallow. This wasn't just a bad moment. This was his life now. Jessica shook her head one last time, then turned away. I can't do this, Ryan. We're done. She walked off, leaving him standing there, his world crumbling around him. Mark and Josh didn't say anything. They didn't need to. Ryan was alone, and there was no escaping what he had done. Ryan Hayes sat alone in his dark hotel room, the glow of his phone screen casting eerie shadows across his face. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. He had done nothing but refresh his notifications, watching his life collapse in real time. The viral video had now amassed millions of views. The comments were endless. The hate was relentless. This guy deserves to be blacklisted from every job on the planet. Imagine insulting a war hero and thinking you'd get away with it. Career? Over. Girlfriend? Gone. Reputation? In the gutter. Congrats, buddy. The worst part? People had found everything. His full name, his LinkedIn, his employer. Even his old tweets, ones he barely remembered, were now being dug up and used against him. His phone buzzed with a new email. He didn't even have to open it to know what it was. The last time his boss had emailed him, he had still been hopeful, had still believed he could somehow spin this, make people see that it was all just a misunderstanding. That was before the company issued an official statement distancing themselves from him. That was before he was fired. That was before his entire future turned to ash in his hands. His breathing was shallow, his hands trembled as he scrolled through his social media, his following plummeting as people rushed to unfollow him. Even his closest friends refused to answer his calls. Mark and Josh had gone completely silent. Jessica had blocked him on everything. He was truly, completely alone. And the worst part, the war hero, the old man who had shut him down with nothing but words, was probably sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of what was happening to him. Jim Reynolds had no idea Ryan Hayes was drowning in his own downfall. He had spent the morning the same way he always did, waking up early, making a cup of coffee, and walking to the park to sit on his favorite bench. The world moved fast, but he didn't. Not anymore. He didn't care about social media. He didn't care about viral videos. He didn't care about whatever was happening to that entitled tourist. He had already won. Because he hadn't needed to yell. He hadn't needed to fight. He had simply spoken the truth. And truth always carried weight. As he sipped his coffee, he noticed more people stopping by the memorial than usual. Some laid down flowers. Others simply stood in silence, hands in pockets, eyes lowered in respect. He smiled to himself. Maybe, just maybe, the world hadn't forgotten how to show respect after all. Ryan finally left his hotel room on the third day. Not because he wanted to, but because he had nowhere else to go. His company had cut him off. His credit card had been frozen. His reputation was so toxic that no one wanted to be associated with him. The money that had once made him feel invincible meant nothing now. So, with nowhere else to turn, he found himself back at Liberty Memorial Park. He didn't even know why he had come. Maybe some part of him thought it would help. Maybe some part of him believed he could make things right. Or maybe he was just desperate to face the man who had ruined him. Jim was there, sitting on his usual bench, watching the world go by like nothing had changed. Ryan hesitated. His legs felt heavy. For the first time in his life, he felt small. But he walked forward anyway. Jim didn't look up until Ryan was standing right in front of him. The silence stretched between them. Then, finally, Ryan spoke. His voice was hoarse, weak. "I lost everything." Jim took a sip of his coffee. "Did you?" Ryan swallowed hard. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Jim studied him. "Didn't mean for what to go this far?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "I didn't think it would blow up like this. I was joking. I was just messing around." Jim let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "No, son, you weren't joking. You were disrespecting. There's a difference." Ryan's throat tightened. I just... "You got humbled," Jim interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "And now, you don't know what to do with it." Ryan looked away. He hated this. Hated the truth of it. Jim sighed and gestured to the bench. "Sit down, son." Ryan hesitated, then slowly sank onto the wood beside him. The world felt quieter here. Jim sipped his coffee, staring straight ahead. "Tell me something. When you woke up this morning, did you still have a roof over your head?" Ryan blinked, caught off guard. Yeah." "Still got food in your belly?" Ryan exhaled. "Yeah." Jim nodded. "Then you didn't lose everything." Ryan was silent. Jim placed his cup down. "You lost your pride. You lost your reputation. But those things, they come and go." Ryan swallowed. "I don't know how to fix this." Jim smirked. "Well, for starters, stop thinking about how to fix yourself and start thinking about how to fix the damage you caused." Ryan let that sink in. Jim nodded toward the war memorial. "You spent your whole life thinking the world owed you something. Maybe it's time you gave something back." Ryan stared at the memorial, at the names carved in stone. He had never really thought about it before, never really understood what it all meant. But now he felt something shift. Maybe he couldn't erase what he had done, but maybe, just maybe, he could start making it right. Ryan Hayes sat on the bench beside Jim, staring at the war memorial in silence. His mind, once a swirling storm of arrogance and self-importance, was now eerily quiet. The weight of the past few days had settled deep into his bones. His career was gone, his friends had abandoned him, his reputation was beyond repair. But strangely, none of that mattered in this moment. What mattered was the realization that he had never actually seen the world beyond his own reflection. Jim didn't say anything for a long time. He simply sipped his coffee, watching people pass by, his cane resting against his knee. Ryan felt like he should say something, anything, to fill the empty space. But what could he possibly say to a man who had given everything while he had taken everything for granted? Jim finally broke the silence. You know, the worst part about getting old isn't the body breaking down. It isn't the aches or the stiffness or the doctor's visits. He turned his gaze toward the memorial, eyes scanning the names etched into the stone. It's knowing how many good men didn't get the chance to grow old. Ryan swallowed hard. Jim exhaled. You walk through life thinking it's all about you, son, that the world is yours to take. But let me tell you something. The world was built by men who never came home, by men who died so others could live without fear. And you spit on that sacrifice because you thought it made you look strong. Ryan flinched at the words, but he didn't argue. He had nothing left to say. Jim shook his head, his expression unreadable. Strength ain't in the words you throw at people. It's in knowing when to shut up and listen. Ryan had never truly listened before. For the first time, he did. A family walked past them, a father holding his young son's hand. The boy pointed at the names on the memorial, whispering a question Ryan couldn't hear. The father kneeled, explaining something in hushed tones, his expression filled with reverence. Ryan felt a pang of shame. He had walked through this park before, had seen these names, had never cared to ask who they were. Jim gestured toward the memorial. That wall has more honor in 1 square inch than most men earn in a lifetime. He looked Ryan in the eye. You want to fix what you broke? Start by understanding the value of what you mocked. Ryan hesitated. How do I do that? Jim studied him for a long moment before answering. By giving back. Ryan frowned. Give back how? Jim reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. There's a Veterans Outreach Center a few blocks from here. They help homeless vets get back on their feet. Men who fought for this country and got left behind when they came home. He held out the paper. You want to start making this right? Go there, help them, work with them, and maybe, just maybe, you'll start understanding what real sacrifice looks like. Ryan took the paper, staring at the address. He had spent his whole life taking respect he hadn't earned, taking admiration he hadn't deserved, taking opportunities without ever considering where they came from. For the first time, he wanted to give. He exhaled. Okay. Jim gave a small nod, as if he had already known what Ryan's answer would be. Then maybe there's hope for you yet. Ryan looked back at the memorial one last time. The names, once just letters carved into stone, now felt like something he had no right to ignore. He wasn't sure if he would ever be able to undo the damage he had done. But he could try, and for the first time in his life, trying was enough. Jim tapped his cane against the ground and stood. I'll see you around, son. Ryan watched him go, realizing that he had just learned the most important lesson of his life. Respect wasn't given, it was earned, and he had a long way to go.